is in the middle of a...
Okay, it's not. What is it? What was...
Well, let me see what we did last. What we did last was lament. Okay. So I'm going to start with mem, which is water, chaos, mighty, and blood. Oh, how I love your law. I meditate on it all day long. Your commands make me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes. I have more understanding than the elders, for I obey your precepts. I have kept my feet from every evil path, so that I might obey your word. I have not departed from your laws, for you yourself have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. I gain understanding from your precepts, therefore I hate every wrong path. I
hate every wrong path. See, that's
right.
What we're supposed to do. We're supposed to hate every wrong path. Let me see, we got, 2-2 was last week, wasn't it? We did 2-2 last week?
We are on,
okay.
Yes, and we're 2-3 is what we're on today.
Okay, so I'm off on both of those. That was me. It was...
Well, we can skip 2-3
whatever.
if you
No,
want.
we don't want to skip 2-3. We'll go with 2-3. I'm glad I checked that, though, because I put 2-4 there for some reason. And okay, let's see. We got read that. We got some folks. Well, they're not traveling till next week, but we got some folks traveling here, some folks traveling here, and then when are you guys leaving again? Next week, right?
What's that?
You're leaving again next week?
3 weeks.
Oh, in 3 weeks. Okay, so we don't have to worry about him. That's like eternity for these people. All right, all I got on prayers is Nancy in Ohio is really struggling with shingles, so keep her in prayer. And then a lady that some of you probably know, and certainly the people online might know her, is Arlene Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E. I've never known how she actually pronounces that, but she's been a great... at one time somebody sent me an email and said, I never see you wear the same shirt twice. And that's because I never throw anything away, and I got shirts that still fit me from high school. So I literally have hundreds of shirts, and I've never bought a shirt in my life. But Arlene was the type of person that would send me a shirt like, it's Thanksgiving, here's a shirt. It's Christmas, here's a shirt. It's, your birthday, here's a shirt. And so I have... innumerable shirts from Arlene. Well, she died this past week. And I wanted to let the people online know that in case they know her and didn't, I don't know what she went on because sometimes online people use a different name, but she'd been attending the church since we opened and from up in, outside of Chattanooga, and just a wonderful person. So anyway, we'll get to see her again soon enough, and I can't feel bad about it. By any stretch of the imagination, I cannot, because every single email I ever got from her, everyone, all she wanted to do was be with Jesus. That's all I ever heard from her, and that's all she ever hears from me. And so, the only difference between her and me right now is that she beat me. That's it. How do you feel bad when somebody got what they want? She's like, I just don't want to be here. I want to be with Jesus. And so there you go. I don't mind being here. Hidiko's a pretty good cook. And
20.
Okay. I know, that wasn't nice. She's a great cook, wonderful wife. I'm happy to be here. Get to see you all.
The arsenic is still in the cabinet.
Yeah, I know. That's it. Okay, so today is November 20th. A doctor's vow on November 20th of 1759. The Arundel approached an unknown ship in the waters off the West Indies. The tanned sailors stood by their guns as Captain Charles Middleton sent a boarding party to investigate. The Swift proved to be a slaver bound for Guinea. They carried the plague. Middleton summoned his surgeon, James Ramsay, a young man he had led to Christ. The doctor clambered aboard the Swift and reeled in horror. The holds were jammed with naked slaves, chained row upon row, writhing and groaning and sweating and dying of the plague. The stench was unbearable, the filth unbelievable. Ramsay left the Swift, vowing to do his utmost for slaves. Shortly after he retired from his naval service, he became a pastor on the West Indies Isle of St. Kitts. My grandmother's grandfather was the governor of St. Kitts. So there you go, yeah. He purchased 10 slaves from tyrants, and Ramsay became their servant, teaching them scripture and treating them medically. His hatred of slavery grew as he visited nearby plantations, treating wounds inflicted by whips and branding irons. Owners threatened him when he advocated humane treatment of slaves, and when Ramsay called for the abolition of slavery, he was attacked in the local papers. Censored by the Christians and driven from the island, Ramsay took a pastorate in the English countryside of Kent. Though only 48 years old, he looked old and drawn. Day and night the cry of slaves haunted him, and the memories of November 20th, 1759 never left him. He put his feelings into print and braced himself for another storm. It came, but this time he had an ally, his old captain. Old Captain Charles Middleton, now a member of Parliament. Middleton joined Ramsay's crusade, but looked around for a younger, more eloquent member of Parliament to be his leader. He chose William Wilberforce. Wilberforce's lifelong crusade to abolish slavery in Britain is well known, but few remember that it can be tracked back to a quiet Christian doctor who made a vow on November's Day in 1759. Jesus went back to Nazareth and went to the meeting place on the Sabbath. When he stood up to read from the scriptures, he was given the book of Isaiah the prophet. He opened it and read, "The Lord's Spirit has come to me because he has chosen me to tell the good news to the poor. He has sent me to announce freedom for prisoners." So there you go. On my grandfather's side was another very strong abolitionist who was Thomas Cresson Garrett, who my grandfather is named after. You can go online and you can read about him on Wikipedia. They got books written about him. He was the last stop on the Underground Railroad. And what's her name? Harriet Tubman went through his house innumerable times, and he lost his entire fortune helping slaves get emancipation or freedom or whatever it's called when you escape from the South. And he was credited with rescuing 3,000 slaves personally. So good job.
What's his name?
Thomas Cresson, Cresson Garrett. Maybe it's just Thomas Cresson. My grandfather was Thomas Cresson, so it might be Thomas Cresson. Was he a Garrett? I think he was a Garrett. Anyway, you can look it up on Wikipedia and just type in Thomas Cresson slaves, and it'll come up. And it may say Thomas Cresson Garrett.
You got the stamp?
Well, yeah, we got some stamps with his name on there. That's right. They had him honored in stamps, and but yeah, this is. There you go. And people blame the Christians for every bad thing on the planet, and it was the Christians that got slavery done. You know, this thing about reparations is the biggest nonsense on the planet, right? You got something that they were selling their own people in Africa. We had black slave owners in America, and of course it's all been blamed on white Christians, which is exactly the opposite of the case. But
yet slavery exists elsewhere in the world right now.
Right now, it's everywhere. Nobody says anything about
that.
it.
It's like,
yeah, nobody says anything about slavery in the world right now, but it's all over the place, and it's all white Christians' fault. So, nonsense. That kind of stuff goes absolutely nowhere with me.
What was that name again, Charlie?
Thomas Cresson, Cresson. Is his last name Garrett?
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas Cresson Garrett. And
Does he have a beard?
no, he doesn't. He was a clean-shaven guy. Good. Yeah, he's a good-looking guy. Hey, I look like that when I shave. But he's got a lot more hair than I do. Anyway, that's him, and you can read all about him,
Got a
and
black shirt on.
you can get the collector's stamps. They're probably very expensive by now because they sold out immediately because it was a slave issue, and everybody just Anyway, okay, we got to get into the study. So here we go. Heavenly Father, it's very, very wonderful to be in your presence and to just revel in who you are. Thank you that there have been faithful people like this gentleman we just read about that have been willing to take up a cause and to see it to its end. And we've got people over the years that have taken up the cause of translating the Bible, like Robert Young, and we've got people that have taken up the cause of being missionaries around the world, and they've dedicated their lives for it. We've got James Strong, who gave us the concordance of the Bible, and the most exhaustive concordance in biblical history. I mean, just these people were willing to expend themselves for your sake and for the sake of what is morally right in many cases, and such as the slavery issue. And so, Lord, we thank you for that, and we just thank you for those who continue that on today, whether it's faithful pastors or preachers or missionaries or evangelists, people out there telling about Jesus. Thank you for that. Help us to have this right mind and to handle your word responsibly, to not get caught up in goofy things that are unprofitable, and to just stick to what's right. Thank you for this word. It's so precious. Lord, we pray for the people that are having difficulties, trials, whatever in the world right now, especially in the church, and those who will be traveling in the week ahead. And thank you for the people that come to visit. And then we just pray that they'll have a safe trip home this weekend. And we just ask that this class will be handled properly and that you'll be glorified through it. And if there's anything that's incorrectly taught, please alert us to that so that we can get it corrected. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So here we are. Yes.
Just to note, he's also on Grokpedia.
He's on Grokpedia now.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. We don't need to go to Wikipedia anymore. That's just.
There you go.
I'm so glad Elon Musk is in the picture right now. He's really done a lot of great things, and I understand. I say it every time. I have to qualify because he's kind of a nut job, but at the same time, he understands certain things that are right, and he's willing to think differently about things. He started out as a liberal, and now he's I guess you would call him conservative, or at least open-minded to the world around him, that there's a real war of good and bad going on, and he's trying to keep people on this side where they have freedom of speech, freedom of thought, entrepreneurship, government out of the way. These are good things, so I applaud him for at least that. Okay, we are in Titus, and we're in chapter 2, and I've been told that we are in verse 3, despite what I wrote on the board. So ignore the board and go with verse 3.
I'm going to start with 1, though.
That's fine.
2:1. You must teach what is in accordance with sound doctrine. 2. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. 3. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good.
Okay, it's essentially the same, just written differently. The older women, likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. Okay, so here we are. We're in 2 Timothy 3, and Paul now turns from the older men of the previous verse to the older women. They likewise are to be reverent in behavior. That's Paul's words, reverent in behavior. He uses 2 unique words here. The first indicates behavior or demeanor. It is a compound word which gives a sense of settled according to a fixed, exact design. Reverent in behavior helps word studies. The second word indicates a sacred place, such as a temple. Thus, the older women are to have behavior which is holy, sacred, and befitting of God. Okay, so this is just the attitude that they're supposed to have, and you don't always find this even in older women, and but this is what's expected of them in the church. He then says, not slanderers. The same word here, when used with the article, indicates the slanderer, meaning the devil. So it's the same word, but without the article, it's not speaking of him. And as I remind you, when you see the word Satan in the Old Testament, it doesn't have to be speaking of the devil. All it means is just an accuser, somebody that accuses. The first use of the word Satan in the Old Testament is referring to the Lord. Okay, so we want to make sure that when we understand that when it does not have the article before it, it's not a bad word. It's just a word that conveys meaning, accuser. And the Lord
accusing.
He was standing accusing Balaam. He was invisible. The donkey veered, and finally he stood as an accuser against Balaam. Okay, so that's the first use of it. It's not saying he's Satan and there's some type of mystical thing going on. There's a lot of people love to make stuff up like that. It's just a word, okay? And then when you add the article before it, it will be speaking of the devil, the accuser. Okay, it's just a title that is used. The article defines that. That's one of the things that bothers me. I've mentioned this many times, but I just love to tell what bothers me is when they leave the article off of words in the Old Testament. They just skip them. Anytime the word "the" is before the word God, it means something. And they never, no translations included in there. It's like they didn't do it on the first one, and so that must be right, and we're just going to continue that for the next 1,000 years. They don't put it in there. The same thing is true with Satan. Quite often they don't include the article, and so it confuses the narrative, or they put the article there, and then it makes it sound like it's Satan, when it's not. Okay, that's the case with when David, I won't get into it, I've done that just recently, but there's all kinds of words that have an article before it. We see it all the time in the typology. Gilead will have the article and it has a meaning. The Gilead. It means the perpetual fountain. But if it doesn't have the article and it's speaking of the exact same place, it would mean perpetual fountain. In typology, it means something entirely different. There's a reason for that article, and they don't include it in translations, and so you have no idea what's going on if you're looking for typology. You actually have to go to the Hebrew to know and to be able to deduce what's going on. Unfortunately, we've got people that are willing to do that in this church, but most churches, people aren't instructed to go check the Hebrew. And so they have no idea that there's actually something important that's being conveyed, and you'll never get proper typology without understanding the article. And it's not just Gilead. It's dozens of times. It's all through. There's one instance. This is so fascinating. It's coming up in a sermon soon. And I emailed these two, and I said, is this something common that you say in Hebrew? And they were like, no, we can't think of it. And so it was the name. A person's name has the article before his name. The person. I'm not going to give it because I don't give away the sermon. But it's one of the people, and we'll just say you've got Saul and David and Jonathan and Joab and Abner, and you got all these people. One of them has "the" in front of his name. And I have checked innumerable names, and it's the only instance I can find in the entire Old Testament. I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's the only one I know of. And I went through name after, I just kept doing it. And there's a reason why that article is there. It now means the something instead of his name. It doesn't mean his name anymore. It is saying this, you need to explain what his name is. If the name is, we'll say the name means Christmas puppy. Okay, that's his name. Hey, Christmas puppy. Well, now it says the Christmas puppy. Well, then it must have a meaning. You translate the name now. Then you don't see that in the Hebrew. And so you're losing all of that, in the translation. You're losing all of that information. Okay, so right here, the slanderer, okay, meaning the devil. Thus it would be accusers, or those who unjustly criticize and judge others. Something that all people are kind of famous for. It's a human trait where we love to accuse people of things. And we really have to work to not do that to other people. It's very easy to talk behind people's back. It's very easy to say things that we shouldn't. And we have to be conscious of this. In Christianity, we're not supposed to be doing those type of things, especially with the people in the fellowship. Okay? At what point do I say, I just shouldn't say this? Such would be backbiters. They demonstrate an evil nature as they talk in ill manner of other people. Okay, this is something that we're not supposed to do. Like I said, it's very easy for us to do it. We get caught up in that, starting in school, you get your little cliques and you start saying things and it becomes a part of who you are. And it's not something that we should be doing. Okay, and we learned that especially watching TV, right? I mean, it becomes so popular, you watch school shows and they make their little things and they start doing it, and then you kind of think, well, this is a society in which we live. So I was getting some lunch today, and I was talking to the ladies, and they're Thai ladies, and I asked them a question, and I said, I'm just curious about this. And then we got talking about questions that you don't ask in a normal society. And one of the things that Americans normally don't ask is a person's age. Until we know them, it's not, may do it to a guy, but you usually don't do it to a girl. And
You want to live.
yeah, if you want to live, and you don't try to guess people's age. Whereas in Thailand, it's exactly the opposite. They go by a system of honorifics. And if somebody is 5 days older than you, that person gets a title. If it's an older female, they'd say, like, her name is Nang, Pinang. She's now older. You're older Nang. And the only way you can determine that is by finding out how old people are. Whereas here, we don't want to know that. I mean, we're like, or we might want to know it, but we're embarrassed to ask because she's pretty and you might get your nose punched, right? So anyway, there are certain things that we say, certain things that we don't say, and there are certain things in Christianity that if we do say, we've got to stop saying, okay? And that's got to follow.
Buried.
What's that?
Buried.
Oh yeah, I know. The word buried, right? It's so ingrained in us that we say Jesus was buried on the third day. And I've been actively trying to get myself to stop saying that because he wasn't buried. We didn't put him in a hole and put dirt over him. He was put into a tomb. He was interred, okay? But because the word buried is used in all these translations, it's in our head. And I want to be precise about that. So, you want to try to be precise, especially when it comes to Bible things, right? And that was really noisy. No, I'm kidding. You could see he was like really trying hard to not. I don't care. That doesn't bother. I'll tell you what bothers me. What really is hard to preach over, just so you all are aware of this, I might as well say because nobody's doing it right now, is when somebody has the little cellophane wrappers on candy and they're trying to be. That is so annoying. If you've got candy, just open the thing. The punishment of having something opened is minimal at best. It's done. But when you're trying to preach and think in that little piece of candy, and they're trying their best to not bother you, which is making it 10 times worse. If you go to church somewhere, don't open the candy slowly. Just open it. When you do something unnatural, it causes people to fixate on it. When you just do things naturally, it doesn't bother. So just open your candy and eat it.
I thought you were
Okay.
going to say snoring.
Snoring, that's just indicative of a normal sermon in my case. I'm so used to people snoring that it doesn't even bother me anymore. But it used to be very troublesome, and I thought, why are these people all snoring? Yeah. Anyway, let's see here. So next, I read that. Next, he says the older women are not to be given too much wine. Okay, that's Paul's words exactly. The word he uses indicates being enslaved by. Okay, a woman is not to be enslaved by wine. Okay, that's in the, where was I there? Okay, thus the older women are not to be prisoners to the bottle. They are to be temperate, drink moderately, and avoid drunkenness. I know that's not popular in churches to hear a preacher say it's okay to drink, but that's what Paul is saying. He's not saying that they shouldn't drink. He's saying drink moderately. Do not be prone to drunkenness. And if you don't drink, all the better. And if you do, keep it to yourself. You don't need to be passing that around and saying, well, there's some people have had trouble with drinking in their life, and it's the kind of thing that you just don't want to project on other people. If you go out to dinner and you are with somebody that doesn't drink, why would you order a drink right in front of them? That's just not even polite. Okay, so if you know something, act accordingly. If you don't know, it can't be held against you. But try to have a sense of what's going on in the people around you. Okay, the women are to remain sober and alert. And we're speaking of the older women here. Okay, and then finally, the women are to be teachers of good things. Instead of drinking and being irreverent slanderers, they are to rightly instruct their children. Okay, this is a job that parents are to have. It's a job that older ladies are to have with kids that are, maybe you're watching them during church or something. All the other parents are over there doing something and whatever. You're not going to be teaching them how to beat each other up. So you just, they're to rightly instruct their children, to be good examples. And you can't be a good example if you've been drinking all morning, right? So it's common sense words, but Paul is writing these things to people that don't have common sense, meaning us, human beings. All right, common sense is not common. It is not common. Okay, it's also not intuitive. That's true, but common sense is not a common thing. It has to be instructed into people. All right, we don't grow up normally with common sense in, culture. That's something that we have to learn from the culture. Okay, and that's why, when you have people from other cultures come in and they don't know the culture, then you have a breakdown in that. And they need to be told that this is proper in this country. And when they don't do that, it causes a problem. We've seen that for the past 4 years. Europe is going through it continuously, and it's getting worse by the day because people are not assimilating into the culture that they have taken root or, taken up residence in. And, so the women there will teach their children differently in the Mideast than they will in Europe. And so now you've got this conflict going on. And it's too bad. If somebody says, I want to move to that country, the first thing they should do is say, I want to be willing to adapt to the norms of that society. That should be preeminent in their thinking. Okay. One of the things I remember when I was in Japan is I knew one guy that never, Yokota Air Base is not a big air base. It's probably a quarter the size of Siesta Key. It's a teeny little place. And you know what happened? Before I go on, Don sent me an article this morning. Somebody they were practicing parachuting at Yokota. The Army was dropping people off over the flight line, I guess. And one of them got sucked out and he landed, you know where? Hamuramachi, our old hometown. So, you have some guy landing through your roof in Hamura, right? So, do you remember our address there?
Hello.
San no ni san no san ni Midori ga oka Hamuramachi Tokyo to. That's right, you got that. She said,
Wow.
yeah. Anyway, so I can't believe you remember that. It's been like 35 or more years.
Wow.
Good girl. Okay, so what was I saying about that? Where was I? Okay, life examples, slanderers, rightly children. I was making a point about Japan, and then I got off. I remembered Hamura, and now I forgot the point I was making.
Talking about the culture.
Culture.
How it
Assimilate.
Oh, assimilating. There. Thank you. That small little Yokota Air Base, and I knew people that never left it. They came in on the cattle car, which is a military plane. They didn't want to fly through the Japanese airport, so they came in on the cattle car. And they left on the cattle car, and they never took a step off. And I thought, what a loss. There's so much beauty in Japan. There's so much to experience and to see. The people are polite. You never see crime. If you go to the bus station, and I'm not kidding, I've sent him a photo of this recently. As far as the eye can see, there are bicycles. What they do is they ride their bike down to the, not bus station, train station. They ride it to, we'll say Fusa Eki, which is the Fusa train station. And there's thousands. There's so many bikes you can't believe it. And then what they do is they ride the train to wherever they work, and they get on their bike and they ride to work. So they have two bikes, okay? Not one has a lock. Not one has a lock. Not one bike has a lock anywhere. It is isn't it true? I mean, I'm just saying this, and I could be lying, but she'll validate that. It is now, that was 25, 30 years ago, but I'm sure it's the same. They're very organized, rigid society that doesn't believe in harming other people. And so I determined when I went there, I am going to learn what they do because I'm going to be living out in I'm not going to be living on the base. And so I need to not have my neighbors offended all the time by me. And so I wanted to learn what's right and what's not. Now, of course, there are things that you just don't know until you know, and they're very gracious when you do something that wasn't right. But you can see them, they call it the sound of sucking wind. That means that they're a little disappointed in something. If you ask, well, is it, can we go do this? They're like, they don't want to ever say no, or they don't want to correct you, and so you hear the sound of sucking wind, then you have to ask what's going on. You want to be able to adapt in a society. And that's the point I'm making, and this is the point that Paul is making. We are to live within the society and live within the cultural norms of it. But in Christianity, we want to take it a step further. Paul is writing to Titus. Titus is going to an island where people do not have Christian norms as their culture. So not only is Titus going to have to learn maybe he was from there. I can't remember the situation with him, but if he has to learn the norms of the society like a missionary would, he also has to be able to tell them what is proper within the church without becoming legalistic and saying, well, we need to do this because we do it in America. Okay, and that's one thing that some missionaries will do. They will go into a country and they get everybody to adapt to their culture in another country, which is ridiculous. They live within their culture. What they need to do is know Christian morals and values within the confines of their culture. Jesus is the Messiah of Israel. He is the Christ of the nations. Every nation is there because he planted them there, because they are an individual group of people that can glorify him in their own society, in their own way. It doesn't have to be the American way or the British way or whatever. And that's one thing that we need to remember. If we send missionaries, and they're taught on this, you need to be the one that adapts to their culture, okay? But not to the point where it calls into question your Christian values. And so that's something that people have to learn as they go through missionary training. Anyway, life application. We all have choices to make each day. How will we conduct our lives? What words will we speak? What actions will we demonstrate to the world around us? Each thing we do will be seen by those around us, and they will make their determinations about our character, especially our relationship with the Lord. Exactly what you were talking about earlier. He says he's got a Bible in his car, and all of a sudden there's an aura that reminds him, I have to uphold the value that's sitting on that seat next to me. Because if I get out and I'm not projecting that, then it causes a disconnect in people's thinking about what, and that goes both ways, because there are a lot of really stuffy Christians out there, and they project a negative image on Jesus because of their stuffiness. And we don't want to be that way either. We don't want to be legalistic people that you want that. There's plenty of churches down the road here that do that. Okay. And we were in a church where, because our children went to that school where, you had to have a dress below your knees. There was no dancing, no being happy. You were never to smile or anything. I'm kidding about the last one. But it was just one of those things that they were stuffy and there was no reason for it. Okay. People have lives to live and they have lives to enjoy. And that goes back to the thought of, going overseas and you're wearing a three-piece suit, or not a three-piece, a suit and a tie, and you go and you evangelize people there. They're not going to know, what is this guy doing? You want to look like a local and you want to act like a local and you want to treat them like they're human beings. Not that you're better above them and you're trying to somehow elevate them. You're trying to move them from the devil to Jesus. Okay, you don't need to do that with a suit and a tie in the jungle of Indonesia. Okay, but that's the attitude of some people. Anyway, so they each thing we do will be seen by those around us, as you were saying, and they will make their determinations about our character based on those things we do, say, and live out. Let us remember this and be careful to conduct our lives with the constant remembrance that our commitment to the Lord is a part of the evaluation of our character. How committed are we to Jesus? How does that reflect on our character? Because they're looking at our character and they're making judgments about Jesus based on that. Okay? So that was pretty quick. We got that done really quickly. That was great. 2-4. Oops.
Then they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, and to be busy at home.
Okay. 4, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Okay.
I stopped halfway through 5 because I knew I had gone beyond it, but you did the whole thing.
Oh, I see. There is a 5 there. Okay. All right. Yeah, to love their children. I was wondering. I'm like, that one verse is as long as the entire commentary.
Yeah,
but
right.
okay, I'm sorry. That stopped that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children. Okay. All right. So you went into verse 5.
I started to.
That's okay. That's what happened because my mind was trying to remember all the words that you had said, and I'm like, anyway. Okay. Here we go. We're getting our foot back in the right.
Stirrup.
Yeah, thank you. The right stirrup. That's hard. When you got your feet in the wrong stirrup, That's a rough
The
ride.
horse complains a lot.
That is a rough ride. That's right. Okay, so 2:4. Paul continues to write concerning the older women of the previous verse, but it is a verse which then transfers instruction to the younger women. Okay, to the older women, he exhorts that they admonish the younger women. Okay, so you've got the older women, they're not to do these things, but they're also to positively do these things. All right, to the older women, he exhorts, they admonish the younger women. Some translation add in the words to be sober. Okay, that's, was that in yours?
What, in the
To
beginning?
be sober.
Addicted.
Addicted. Okay, same. Yeah.
Or
Okay.
addicted to.
So yours has that. This one doesn't. So that means that the Alexandrian text added those words in, or they fell out of this text. My guess is that they added them in, but that's just a guess. I'd have to go and look at a lot of other things to make that determination. But in other words, teach the young women to be sober. Okay. This is not the correct use of this unusual verb. To be sober should be left out. Okay, so I made the determination then. And sometimes, you get two texts that have differences, obviously. Okay, this is what happens. And I've explained this. It happened to me again this week, is that I'm going through and I'm evaluating things, and I will see in a translation I was doing for the sermon that I was typing, I left out 3 words. And the reason why is because you've got these, and then you come to a word, we'll just say asher, which means which, right? You've got this word, and then here it's asher down here. And so your eye picks up this one and misses that, and so you miss the 3 words in between the two. And so you have to be careful when you do that. And I know that if I translate the book of 1 Samuel, there are going to be missing words. There's going to be words that are added in. And that's why somebody will need to sit down with me and read 1 Samuel from a good literal translation, and then we'll just follow along. As they're reading, I'll follow along, and we'll know if I missed a word or not. Because otherwise, you have no idea. You skip things over. So when that happens, it's not that there's a problem with the Word of God. This is a problem that a lot of people that hold to a single translation will say. That doesn't have this word in it, but the King James Version does, and therefore your Bible is incorrect. And that's assuming that that Bible is the wrong one and the King James Version is the correct one, which they immediately do because they believe it's the only inspired Word of God. One of the things that's a problem with King James onlyism, and I don't think I've ever addressed this particular issue, but if the King James Version is absolutely, it's not, because you've got different copies of the King James Version. You've got the Cambridge and you've got the Oxford, and they don't match. Well, which one is, and then you've got the original 1611, which had errors, and so they corrected it. So anyway, it's a long study. I've got a lot of it on a page on the website. If you want to do the study on King James onlyism, I've got a huge page on it. With all kinds of information at the top and at the bottom. And in the middle, I list about 8,000 errors in the King James Version that I found. And I finally just stopped looking because there's so many. But it's like any other translation. It's not a good translation. Okay, it's just not. But one of the problems with the thinking of, the King James is the only translation, or the Septuagint is the only translation, or this text is the only. The problem with that is, can anybody tell me the problem with that? Saying that this particular text or this particular translation is the correct one.
We don't have the original.
That's one reason. There's a couple of them. They don't have the original. They have no idea what the original is. There's a reason why God didn't have us have the originals, too. And I can give you just a very quick background on that. We don't have the originals because if somebody had the originals, they would have authority over the Word of God, and God didn't want that to happen. This is His Word. And therefore, if man is translating it, and as I said in a previous Bible study, all of this is pictured in the Ark of the Covenant. The poles that go through the rings on the Ark, everything about the Ark keeps saying the same thing. Zahav tahor, gold pure, gold pure. Everything about the ark. And then when the staves for carrying it are placed into the ark, it says Zahav. Okay? That's all it says. It doesn't say Zahav tahor. It's saying that gold, not pure gold, is what's around those staves. And those staves picture
The Old and New Testament.
the Old and New Testament. It's saying that God has already figured into the picture of redemption that the Old and New Testament will not be pure as long as we have our hands on it. So what she said is correct. We don't have the original, so we can't know. Two, we weren't there at the time that they were transmitted, and so we don't know. Now, we can make inferences based on these three texts have this and this one doesn't, and there's they can tell usually where an error crept in one way or another, whether it was added or whether it was lost or whether the word was misspelled. They can tell that, okay? But one of the things is that we'll just use the King James because that's where most of the cult people are, but if that was the only proper translation, it would mean that God himself not only inspired it, which our Bible is inspired, we know that, okay, but it means that the people that were inspired by God were infallible. They could make no error. And I'm telling you right now that people make errors, okay? There are so many errors in the King James Version that it is actually embarrassing. There's a contradiction. I'll give you, this is an actual literal contradiction. It's not just an error, but in the making of the tabernacle implements, in the tabernacle itself, what does it say that this is to be made after the, begins with P, ends with pattern. Anybody? Pattern. These are to be made after the pattern in heaven. In Hebrews, the King James Version actually turns it around and he says the pattern is made after that. They just mistranslated it. So they took the word and it's backwards. And so it doesn't make any sense. But you just read over it. You're not thinking that when you're reading it, but it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it would mean that those people were infallible. And that's not the case. They were not infallible. They were fallible people, okay? And so the very first sentence of the King James Version is wrong. The very first sentence. Anybody?
In the beginning.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. King James Version says the heaven and the earth. It's the same word that's used like 4 times in Genesis 1. It's shemayim. It's in the plural. And so, of course, the King James people start coming up with excuses. Well, there are different levels of heaven, and he created this one, and they're just making it up. What is a translator's job? To translate. That's it. Their job is not to, if they want to explain, that's what side notes or footnotes are for. That is their job. The job of a translator is to take this and translate it to this. And when it says shemayim, we'll say 4 times in Genesis 1, and 1 time it says heaven, that's an error. Whether they want to agree with that or not, because they will never agree with any error, even the one that says that it's backwards in Hebrews and Exodus, they will never agree to it, because that is where their mind is. They're in that mindset. But I had a point about it, and now I forgot. But be careful about those type of things. We're in 2:4. What was it that some translations? Oh, yeah. Okay, translation. Okay, those type of things. So you need to understand that what we have here is the inspired Word of God. But if there are differences, that is because God has allowed that into the stream of human existence. For very good reasons, okay, to protect his word, actually. The way, I think I might have mentioned this before, but I haven't mentioned it for a while, is the way that God protected the Old Testament is completely different than the way he protected the New Testament. The Old Testament was copied by scribes. Okay, one of the things, and I say it a lot during Sunday sermons, is there is a difference between the written Hebrew and the oral Hebrew. Okay, and I say this quite often, is that I always stick with the written Hebrew unless there's an absolutely 100% positive reason to go with the oral, which almost everybody always uses the oral, but I always stick with the written, is these people would copy these manuscripts very carefully. And what they would do is they would count every single letter. How many letters are in this section? How many letters? And they'd add them all up, and they would, if there was one letter difference, that scroll would be discarded. Okay, it was a very meticulous process that only a very, very select group of people would do. It wasn't something that they took lightly. They had certain traditions that they followed, which I understand traditions, but it was something that they did to guard this sacred nature of the word. And what they would do is they would read through it. And this is why I always go with the written. Okay, you've got this copy, and then you're reading it, and you come to an error. Okay, you're reading it, and somebody else, hey, Shlomi, you're going to read it today. So Shlomi's reading it, and I'm checking it, right? And they come to an error. What are they going to do? They're going to chuck it. It's the same thing as counting them. They've counted them, and they are correct, and so we're going to go with it, or they've counted them, and there's an error, and so they throw it away. Okay, while they're reading it, letter for letter, they come to something, and it is so obvious that it doesn't make sense that, to me, my logic is this: God wanted it that way. If there's something so complicated that we have to sit down and actually think, why did God do this? My thought is I always default to the written, because those people were very precise. And any incompetent kindergartner reading through and they come to a word and it isn't what it says would say, well, that's wrong, right? So that would mean that this guy that had spent his entire life, and the guy with him, their whole life is dedicated to this process, were so incompetent that they missed that error on the read-through. I don't think that's the way it is at all. And so that's why I stick with the written. Now, that's just me. Other people want to go with the oral, and why do they do that? Because it's easy and it makes sense. When you read the Bible and you come to something that doesn't make sense, guess what? It doesn't make sense, right? And so you think, what does that mean? Okay, but God is doing things through the Hebrew people in the meticulous way they gave us His word. The other way, the Greek translation is exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. Instead of having one group of scribes that meticulously handled the process of, copying the scriptures, in the Greek they had innumerable scribes from all over the empire. Their job was to get this word out to the new churches as quickly as possible. Churches are springing up everywhere, and they have thousands of Greek texts. And there'd be errors in them because these guys they were scribes. They weren't highly trained people. They were just people it would be like being a court reporter. It's just somebody that goes through and they do this, okay? And they had different ways. They had what's called majuscule letters. They wrote all in capital, or they had minuscule, or they write all in small. You got different people with different styles. They've got different cultural perceptions. They're all over the Greek Empire, and they're just putting out all of these things. And then we have, in addition to those Greek manuscripts, we've got lectionaries. We got 14,000 lectionaries in the first couple hundred years of the church, where the entire New Testament can be rediscovered just from those lectionaries, minus, I think it's 3 verses that they don't have lectionaries on. The entire New Testament could be reconstructed. So we've got the lectionaries, we've got the Greek texts, we've got other witnesses. It is the most exhaustive body of information on any document from antiquity, by far, by thousands, okay? And people say, well, there's errors in the Bible. But they will teach the Gallic Wars of Caesar that were written 9 centuries later, and they have 9 copies or 8 copies that aren't even complete copies. They teach it as literal history. That is the most hypocritical stand on the planet. The reason why God is preserving His word in this way by having errors is because you can tell from the errors which is correct. You've got 3 that say you, and this one says Y-O-U, and this one says E-W-E. Well, the guy, when he's writing it, he's thinking you, and so he wrote you. We know that, one, you doesn't fit in that sentence properly, and the word you, as in you person, does. You just know. And so by having more and more and more copies of the Old Testament, the more you have, the easier it is to determine the original. And that's why people spend their entire lives going through these documents. Totally different way of coming to the same conclusion. Why is this incorrect? Why is this correct? Are all of these correct or incorrect? It's the same end result. So God has been very careful about maintaining His word. It's not in one single document. Like I said, there are various reasons, there are various good reasons why God has a multitude of documents that are not in anyone's clinging hands. Imagine this. Let me just have you imagine this. If all of those documents, the original documents, the originals of all of the Bible were maintained in the Vatican, what do you think it would be like in Christianity today? It would be an absolute terrible situation that we are in. We've locked away the word, and they can amend it. They can do whatever they want with there, and nobody would ever know. The best thing God could have done is that these originals will not be maintained. Maybe they're somewhere, but we have no idea which they are. Imagine man getting his hands on control over God's word in that way. And they try it. In China right now, they're trying it. They're trying it all over the world. How can we have control over this word for our people? Okay? And it becomes a disaster. So God is infinitely smart. He has not been duped by anybody. Okay, going on. So that was teaching them and the correct use of the verbs and all that kind of stuff. That's what got me onto that rabbit trail there. Teaching the young women is obviously something that comes after first applying the precepts of verse 3 to their own lives. Okay, they got to have these precepts, not to be drunk and to do this and to do and don't do those things. That has to come first in order for them to be proper teachers. Okay, this is a problem. And I've said this several times over the past couple of years, and I know it's probably offensive to even hear it, but it's reality. There's almost never a day, I saw 2 today, there almost never a day that I'm not reading news articles where there is a teacher in America, not just the whole world, just America, that has been having relationships with one of her children, anywhere from 8 until 15 years old. Okay, every single day. 2 this morning. These are teachers in America that are having relationships with their children. And one guy yesterday, so that's 3 in 2 days. Okay, a guy with younger people, but it's usually the females that are, they are not properly morally aligned, and they're put into a position of training. And Paul is saying, don't do that. Have the moral part done first, and then put them into training. If you don't do that, you are going to have a terrible situation, and that is America in a nutshell. It is a terrible situation. Right now, yesterday, 2 days ago, the lady from the education department was being talked to, I think by Congress, but by some panel, and she was saying, my job right now is to continue to disassemble the Department of Education. The Department of Education. She said, that is my job right now, and she is doing it. And instead of having somebody saying, I'm going to go in, I'm going to build a big office, I'm going to have $1 million carpet put in, which these people have been doing for the past 40 years, they are in the process of getting rid of the worst institution in America. It has destroyed more futures of people than any other institution that I can think of, is the Department of Education. It has gone so far to the left in the agenda that they have had that the only remedy is to get rid of it. And once it's gotten rid of, what they need to do, and you'll see education go out of sight in America very quickly. And I hope that they're going to do this, is we are going to take block money based on the size of your state, and we are going to send it to that state. And you will educate your children according to the standards that are set by your state. And the liberal states are going to be putting out a bunch of kids that can't write their own names, just like they do in Baltimore right now and Chicago. They can't pass basic math. They're going to have, in Florida, children that are coming out after 6th grade that are college level students, because they are going to be teaching them properly. Okay? You've got to have the proper morals first, and then the training. And that is what Paul is speaking about here, and we're seeing it realized in our school system and in our culture every single day in America. So it's a perfect example of what's going on. You need a life example to see what Paul is speaking about? There you go. That's it. So the teaching the young women is obviously something that comes after the old women having proper morals and living their lives right first. And then they are to admonish the younger women. Okay, you get the people properly instructed in how to teach, and then they teach. not the other way around. It would be no good for a person who swears all the time to tell the next generation to not go around swearing. It would be self-defeating. What are you doing, right? With that understanding, the older women who are acting in accord with what is right are to then pass their knowledge of proper living on to those who are younger than them. That is how it is supposed to work. That's how the education system in America worked for 200 years. But in the past 60 or so years, it's just been going downhill. And the main reason isn't because of the agenda of the liberal left, but it is a byproduct of it. Okay, it's taking the Bible out of schools. Once they did that, education has been sliding ever since, which that itself was an agenda of the liberal left. So like I said, it was, but that is what has actually caused the moral degradation in America, is that act. No prayers, no Bible. America started to fail immediately, and it's been just going south further and further ever since. So that's all going to be done away with. They can do whatever they want when the next administration comes in, and but right now they are getting rid of that damaging institution in America. So let's see here. They have all the life experiences, which is something, everybody here that has a child, okay, Tom, did your son know it all when he was 16?
Of course.
Okay. Anybody else had that problem? I see a lot of head shaking. Okay. Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So there you go. When you have a kid that's 14 or 15, you can't tell them anything. And yet they have no life experiences. They know everything. And the funny thing is, I have to think this with my father all the time. I'm 61 years old. And I think if my dad had died 15 years ago, I would not have known what to do with XXX. Okay? And then something will come along and I think, I've got it all figured out now. And then, and this, it doesn't say anything negative about my mother, but my father works on a level of things that I don't get. My mom and I kind of get things together. But, 10 years ago, I got it all figured out after that issue. And then something comes up and I think if Dad had died before that, I would not have known how to handle that. Then I think, okay, I've got it all figured out now. And then 4 years later, the same thing happens. And it keeps happening where I say, how would I have handled that if my dad wasn't there to show me? He's got an extra 30 years on me that I don't have. And he's learned all of these things probably from his parents or from personal experience, winnings and losings, okay? And so there is just this body of wealth that you gain as a human being from more years that is invaluable. And we dismiss our parents, even when they're old, like my dad, right? He's ancient. We lose if we dismiss what he knows because he's got something that I don't know. Okay, and I wonder, when is that going to end? When is it going to be? Because he's going to die eventually. What is going to be the thing that I didn't know about when he died, right? And I'm 61. I know it all. I was 14 once, right? I don't know about how you feel about that, but I look back on the last couple years and I think, what would I have done without Dad's information on that? But at the time, it's like, okay, I got that, and I got it all, so...
Twain addressed it.
What?
Twain, he addressed it. He said, when I went to university, my father was the dumbest person I've ever met. When I came back, I was shocked at how much he had learned.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's Okay, now, here's just a question for you. What is Mark Twain's real name?
Oh, gosh, I do.
That's right, Samuel Clemens. Very good. We got a couple of brains here. Okay, so, it's a pseudonym or a pen name. Pen name. Mark Twain, pen name. Anyway, he also said that the coldest the coldest winter he ever lived was a summer in San Francisco.
And I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, they have the life experiences. They know it will bring happiness and contentment. The older people, okay? We think that we are going to get happiness and contentment with this when we're young. And we find out that it's exactly the opposite. We got no satisfaction at all out of it. Zero, right? Okay, so they know, because they have gone through that, what will bring satisfaction and contentment. Hopefully, some people never learn anything. Okay, there are people that are 70 years old that don't know anything at all. They've gone through their entire life without learning anything or applying what they should have learned the first time, right? But I'm saying in general, we learn and then we teach. And young children need to understand that it is the older people that have the wisdom and knowledge. This is one thing, whether you know this or not, but the Chinese society and in general the Asians, but Chinese in particular, are very good about listening to their elders. In America, we say, listen to your elders and, yeah, right, and then we all go out and get drunk or whatever, and that's, we get in a car accident. Okay, that's high school for us. But in China, they're very good about having that instilled in them. When they're young, you listen to what they have to say. And they're very, very respectful to the older people, and it's a cultural thing that we try to instill here, but because, we're so hypocritical in ourselves, don't go out and get drunk and then you see the parents on Christmas Eve going out and they do exactly what they tell you not to do. Well, then of course you're going to do it, right? So, but they're very good about that in Asia, and that's one of the things I really liked when I was in Asia, was seeing how they would stop and they would respectfully listen to the older people. Okay, it was just something that was, you just don't see it here in that way. So anyway, they've got that down really, really well. So they exhibit the proper conduct for holy living. It is now time for them, these older people, to instruct the next generation of young women. That's their job. Once they've got their lives fixed, time to help other people go on the right path. In this, Paul tells them to admonish these young women to love their husbands. Okay? This is another... Okay, I'm going to stop there because this is a great place to stop. Love. Okay? We in America, there's a couple things that we like to do. We like to say, well, I'm going to work hard, and the pinnacle of my life is going to be getting married and finally having children. And that is like the worst model for family living on the planet. Okay, you look at the people that are the most adjusted as husband and wife. It's the ones that started out young together. They started out with nothing, and they worked together to get their lives and their success. When you start out and you make your life a success all by yourself without somebody, and you say, this is going to be the pinnacle on it, it is not going to work. And you see it never work. It always ends up in divorce or something. When you two have gone through all of the tough times together, you are more likely to stick it out and to continue. I was talking to somebody, what's that? Yeah. I was talking to somebody just this past week, and who was this? And I said, close your ears for a minute. I said, I got the best wife. I said, I've been married for 41 years, and she is just... And he said, nobody's married 41 years anymore. I said, well, yeah. I said, some people are. I said, but you've got all of that experience together. And so it's something that is holds things together. Okay, so that's one of the things that they know what will bring contentment. Okay, and Paul love their husbands. So here's the point I was going to make. Okay, and this goes back to exactly what I'm talking about right now. Along with that moving up in the world and saying, I'm going to achieve and then I'm going to make this the crown of my life, is the idea of love. And our idea of love is, because I've got all this money, I've got all this wealth, is I'm going to get a good-looking young lady to be my wife. And that's going to be my idea of love. Okay? I never really thought this through until I watched The Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, I'd lived in Japan. I should have known better, but I didn't really pay attention to this aspect of things. But the Fiddler on the Roof, she is, one of them is doing something, the other one is doing something else. And he is kind of struggling with life. The kids are doing all this stuff, and he looks at his wife and he says, what? Do you remember? Most famous song in the whole movie.
You love me.
Golda, do you love me? She said, stop talking like a fool, and they started singing together. What is love? I'd never seen you before until our wedding night, and, all the embarrassing things about coming together as a husband and wife, that you're going to marry this girl and you're going to be his wife, and you're going to be her husband, and they were just told this is it. And so here they are. They'd been married all of these years, and they'd never once said they loved each other. And their song ended up thinking, well, we've done this and we've done this and we've raised these children. We went through this time. We did. And at the very end, they're singing about how much they love each other because they had developed into the love. And we do exactly the opposite here. We try to fall in love first and then make it work. And it usually doesn't because there's not the commitment to the marriage. If you say, I'm going to stick to this person no matter what, like your vows say you're supposed to, then it is more likely to work. And that's why I didn't pay attention in Japan, but quite often they're arranged marriages. You know, this is going to be your wife. And that's all there is to it. And they end up sticking their whole lives together. Okay, now in Japan, the men get some freedoms that aren't allowed in most other countries. I will admit that. But at the end of their lives, the old men always have this look in their face when they look at their wives that you just don't see in America. I mean, you see it with a few couples, but not all of them. In Japan, those old men that were given this woman as a wife all those years later and probably thought it was the worst deal on the planet, ended up after 50 or 60 years, they can't stop looking at those women. They literally just, when they're eating, they're just enthralled with this woman. And it took all of those years to develop that, just like Golda and whatever her name was. Golda and him. What was his name in the movie?
I forgot.
Yeah. Anyway.
The Fiddler.
Yeah, Fiddler. No, the Fiddler he was the guy on the roof. Anyway, so, you know, try to think about you and what you are going to instruct other people. You know, if you say, well, you got to wait until you find somebody you love, you're setting that person up for a fall. You say you got to find a person that you will be committed to. Committed before love. Love will come. And if it doesn't, big deal. Because when you fall in love when you're young, you fall out of love. It's inevitable. You may fall back into love with the same person, but there's never a point where you love that person. I very rarely have I heard of a person that says, I loved my wife the night we were fighting and she threw something and put out my right eye. You were mad at each other, okay? So a commitment first and then love, okay? And I know that's not popular, but I have seen it around the world. And those are the marriages that last. Those are the marriages that when they're older and they've gone through all of the mistakes that people go through and all the stupid things they've done, they end up looking at each other in a way that you will not see with other people. I saw it, all these old Japanese men. They finally retired. They've got everything, wild oats sown, or what's the term? It's all out of them. And what they have is this lady. And she stayed faithful to him the entire time. And am I telling the truth? I am. They absolutely have a different attitude towards their wife than they had for the first 50 years. And it's one of appreciation. Okay, so Paul tells them to love their husbands. Golda. This is another unique word which signifies a loving friend. Oh, there you go. It is a concept that Paul speaks of elsewhere, though, in Ephesians 5:22 and 23, for example. This is especially important because in the Bible, the family unit is a crucial element of a properly functioning society. I bring this up all the time. Africa has maternalistic societies, and they don't work. That's why they have all the murders, and that's why they have people, killing each other, and because the mother is running the house, and it doesn't work. It's a bad family model. Okay, that doesn't mean that a person whose husband dies and she carries the weight for the family is a bad model. She's a great mother because she took up what she had originally intended to have with a husband. She lost him, and she's going to do her best to be both. But it doesn't work when a woman says, I am in control of this entire family situation. And I constantly, I get emails from Isaac every day. And every single time I get an email, it is almost always pictures of him with women without men. And they're pregnant, and they got kids all over the place. There's no man in the house. And I tell him, Isaac, I've said it to him 1,000 times, you have to start teaching these people biblical life. They have to have a husband and a wife, or you're going to continue to have these problems. AIDS all over the place, children that are abandoned. That's continuous because there's not the family unit. And, hopefully he'll do that. It's so foreign to their culture that, they probably would think he's speaking a Martian tongue or something. But unless that happens, those problems that he takes care of will never go away. They're just going to be continuing on with the next generation. He's helping people temporarily get through a situation. He's not helping the long-term goal. And so I keep trying to remind him. If you get emails from Isaac, tell him that. Tell him to continue to talk about a family unit, a man and a woman raising children. Okay, it's that important. So it's a crucial element of a properly functioning society. As the family unit unites properly, the lives of the people will be more likely to unite properly to their jobs, their society, and so forth. If you've got a dysfunctional family, you're going to have a dysfunctional life in your job, normally. Some people are just dedicated to work. That's their thing. You know, I just love working. I love working. When I'm at 7-Eleven, I just do my best, and I love working. I would be dedicated whether I was, whatever. But that's usually not the case. People that have dysfunctional families also aren't good at keeping jobs. They're not good around their boss. They're whatever, because they just have not had that nuclear family instruction in life to have them adapt within the greater society, okay? So not only their jobs, the society, okay, etc. A loving wife is then at the heart of making this happen. It is also the reason why those who hate God and His Word set out to destroy this fundamental job of young women, which has been going on more and more since the 1960s. Right? Introduce the pill. There's no responsibility. Abortion is okay. Pretty soon, there's no accountability at all. There's no sense of, I need to be a proper wife. As a matter of fact, if you get married nowadays, it's a negative. You've bought into the wrong model, the wrong paradigm. And what's happening all over the world now? Everywhere. Since the 1960s revolution, which has spread all around the world, what has happened everywhere? Every single country.
Is getting ruined.
Not just the family. The numbers in society are going down everywhere. Everywhere. Now, in China, they had a problem and they handled it the wrong way. But America's birth rate is going down. Trump, I mentioned this a couple months ago, was actually talking about giving women money to have children. Guess what Putin's been doing for the past 5 years? Giving women money to have children, because the numbers of families that are having children, Japan is Singapore, I read an article on it I think it was yesterday. Japan, Singapore, these countries that used to have normal birth rates are down to less than the necessary, I think it's 1.67 or 2 point, it's 2 point something, because you have to have 2 point something in a society to keep the society at a level. Not growing, just level. And they're already down to like 1.1 or 1.2 in these Asian countries. And that's because people have no desire to get married anymore, because they can have free sex. And then what happens after free sex is no sex. People become asexual and they sit on the computer. And I've been reading about this for the past 2 or 3 years. Their new lives are geared towards a fake person online. It's just a dream person. And they don't want to associate with anybody anymore. And so they're not even going out to do what they used to do to get away from the family. Right? Now they're not even thinking about having that. Okay? So it's a cycle that the world is in. And if we don't get out of it, then the population is going to continue to diminish. And eventually, the society becomes so top-heavy with old people that it collapses. Because old people we all know this, it takes a lot of care, right? You start having more, not less physical problems when you're older. And the society cannot stand up under that. And so there has to be a continued stream of new generation people, okay? So it's just a fact in life, and it all started with, wars kill a lot of people, that's admitted. But one thing remains normally after wars. It's called women, because women aren't out fighting. And, the women can have babies even if they're not married, okay? And eventually they get a husband and, whatever. So populations do not generally decrease a huge amount with wars unless there's extermination involved, okay? There'll be a blip in there and then it'll come back up. They call it a wartime event. Goes down, comes back up. Okay, and we had a wartime event in 2020 through 2024. Did you know that?
COVID.
We had a wartime event where there was this giant dip with no explanation at all. None. So anyway, just I thought I'd throw that in. But that's something that happens and it can rebound. But when you have the way things are going now, there's no rebound for it. There has to be people that are willing to be married, to continue being married, and to raise their children, and to continue that cycle. That's not happening. Okay, so they hate God, they hate His Word, they want to destroy this fundamental job. The resulting chaos in the extended society becomes a cancer which spreads quickly. The next admonition from Paul is that the older women are to train the young women to love their children. Okay? This is something that is not taught in society today. We are taught first that it's okay to kill your children. That's okay. And even up to the time that they are just about to be born, it's okay to kill them. Okay? That's what we are taught. And then from there, after we're taught that, then we're told to love our children. And I'm sure I'd mention this, but if I haven't, it's worth hearing. As I was going through posts on X last year, and here's Chuck Schumer. Mister, I'm going to abort every baby on the planet. I'm just going to, women have free choice. They can kill all the babies they want forever, and twice on Saturday, kill the babies. That's Chuck Schumer in a nutshell. Yeah. And here he is. He's got a picture of him and his family, and he's holding his brand new grandbaby. And I went on there, I said, you're the biggest hypocrite on this planet. I can't think of a more hypocritical thing than to say, I condone killing babies all over this world, but now I love this baby. Like there's any difference between that and one day ago, right? What a hypocrite, all of them. Hypocritical, it's absolutely disgusting that they have this idea in their head that it's okay, and then to teach that you're to love your children. Tell me that makes any sense at all, okay? It's totally contrary to the biblical model, 100% against it. This doesn't mean that a person is to love their children like a person loves a dog or a fun movie, because that's the way that we're taught to raise our children. It's a love of both nurturing them through tenderness and through discipline. Exactly, through discipline. What does it say about the rod? Spare the rod and spoil the child. That's right. Okay, and there's a couple that come out that are misquoted, but basically, you know, what does Solomon say? Use the rod. You're not going to kill him, and he will learn the lesson. Okay, that's a paraphrase. That's Charlie Garrett paraphrase, but specifically, he tells you that it's okay to use a rod on your child. The child isn't going to die, and he will learn what he was supposed to learn. He's not going to learn it through, oh, Johnny, it's okay. You didn't mean to, stab your sister with that. Just don't do it again. That's not going to do anything. Okay, it's only going to embolden him to do it again. Just like we do when we send people out of the courtroom with no punishment for having done something wrong in society. Very quickly, they learn that it's okay to do anything. And now we've got dead people on subways all over America because the judges are unwilling to teach them something simple, like you did wrong, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Okay? That all starts right here with children. Okay? So, love them, nurture them through tenderness and discipline. A mother who will not properly discipline wrongdoing is not acting in a loving manner. I'm looking at somebody because she's never wanting to ever tell, and that's why there's a father in the family. Tangi and Thor, she would never want to say, you need a spanking now. I want you to get ready. That wouldn't happen. So that's why Dad is there. They get the tough job, right? I don't know about any of you, but when it came time to tell them you did wrong, I would tell them they did wrong in one way or another. I would find a way to, one time I was so bad at my son that I actually took off my shirt and I said, let's go. And he was like, okay, I won't do it again. I'm like, let's do it. He was just, and he never did after that. When I told him, you're old enough now to have a fist fight with me, I think he was 19. I was literally so mad at him. I said, you're an adult now. I said, I'm older than you. I'm sure you can take me, but let's do it right now. And he's laughing. Can you imagine that? I was right in the driveway, right where you park your truck. That's where it was. To this day, I remember it, but I had had enough. You know what, he's too, and even today I joke him, I say, you know what, you're not too old to go for my knee, boy. Faith loves that. He's, what, 38? But I'm not too old there. Anyway, now it's done in fun. Back then it was not fun, I can tell you that. Anyway, a mother that won't discipline wrongdoing is not acting in a loving manner. And that's why the father has to step in. It's painful to correct your children, but it's necessary. Okay? Again, it is the dream of those who hate God to destroy this precept. That's why it is okay to murder the unborn with them, but it is not okay to execute criminals that have been given capital punishment. That is exactly, it's not that, the reason behind it is a fundamental hatred of God. That is why this is introduced into societies. There's no higher reason than that. There are other reasons, like I was trained this way by my loser father who hated God, whatever. But ultimately, it is a hatred of God that says it's okay to kill that helpless child, but it's not okay to execute that brutal, uncaring person. That's a hatred of God. Okay, so properly disciplining children is spoken against as a type of torture by these people. The murdering of one's own offspring through, here it is, abortion, is exalted as freedom from bondage. So I can't discipline my children, but I can kill the child before it's born. That makes sense. And both the faith, you know what? Somebody, our friend, Steve, our friend, I won't give his name here, but he sent me a video yesterday, and it had some bad English in there. It had to. So if you don't want to hear this thing, then, you know, I sent it to one friend. I said, it's got a warning in there because it's got some really bad words in there. But here's what he did. He's a comedian, and he was contrasting a song that last year got, what do they call it when you take a song and you say, we're not going to, like a trigger warning on it. We're just cutting this song off from society. It was from like the 1950s, and I can't remember it. I'd never heard the song, but it was this basic, something like, you know, there's a puppy in the window. But it was a Christmas song. Okay, it was something about kissing on the cheek or kissing the nose or something. It's an old Christmas song. And he said, this has been banned by the left in America. Okay, everybody, you can't listen to this song because it's so insensitive to women. And then he said, this, at the same month that they're doing this, this is the song that is the popular song in America. 3 months it's been at the top of the charts. It was on the Grammys or whatever, the thing where they sing the songs and all that. Okay, and he said, I'm going to read you these two songs, and we're going to see if America is completely lost or not. And this one is like, it's cold out, and I missed you so much, and your cheeks are ruby red, and let me give you a kiss and warm you up, something like that. And then this one, I can't even hint how bad it was. The words they were using, I can't even hint at it because it would leave a picture in your mind that I cannot give you. It was so vulgar and so vile, I can't repeat 5 words from the entire song, okay? And then he'd read another one, and then he'd read this, and the whole audience is laughing, which is funny, but at the same time, because of the way he's doing it, as a comedian, it was so sad that you think, how can this have happened? How can this have happened where they would allow this on public airwaves, actually saying this is the best song in America, when this has been banned because it's insensitive to women, right? It's a hatred of God. That's exactly what it was.
It was Dean Martin, Baby It's Cold Outside.
Baby, It's Cold Outside.
Yeah.
That was it. Dean Martin. And that's exact. Did you see the video?
Yeah.
Okay. You saw the comedian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They tried to ban it in Canada.
Okay.
And the Canadians revolted.
It's
They played
insane.
it on all the channels, it got so much
Good.
traction. It was
It's so stupid. Oh, we can't play this. And it's just the most innocuous song. And then, literally, you cannot repeat the words of that other song. Not 5 of them in a row without you just singing. Who would even think? Who would even think
music,
that?
right.
Absolutely unbelievable. Okay, being a wife and a mother is something ordained by God. We got to finish up right now. It is something that, when lived out according to Scripture, brings glory to Him. That's why we do these things. That's why we instruct children. That's why we instruct people. Don't go drinking to excess. You know what? You got to have control of your life. Okay, now you've got your life. now teach this younger woman to do the same thing so she doesn't go through the same life that you went through. All that experience that you could have learned from listening to your elders, right? Life application. The life as a wife, in obedience to how Scripture defines it, is one of a high and noble calling. The left completely trashes it, dismisses it, says it's abuse and it's male whatever, and it is a high and noble calling. It is sad that this has been spoken so vehemently against in our modern world. God is pleased with the faithful, obedient, and submissive wife who tends to her home and cares for her family. It doesn't matter what society thinks. It doesn't matter at all. All that matters is what God thinks and what pleases Him. And if you are trying to please this society, you will never, ever, ever in your entire life please God. It is impossible because society is built to be contrary to God today. It is built for it, okay? The ship is trying to be corrected. That'll last for another year, and then an election will be lost, and we'll be right back where we were. Don't put your hopes there. Put your hope in the Bible and pay attention to what it says, because that is for what we need for wholesome living. Heavenly Father, how good it is to be in your presence, to share in your word, and to think on the wonderful women in our lives, the responsible mothers and grandmothers that were willing to make the tough choices, to be part of a family, to stick it out even when the husband was doing the wrong thing. And just thank you for them. They've been a real beacon of light in many of our homes. And for us that don't have that or didn't have that, we can see it in others and we can at least instruct them. So help us to just be proper examples ourselves and to look for the positive quality in others and to thank them, Lord, for their willingness to uphold your values. We pray this that you'll be glorified, and we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Speaking of that, speaking of thanking people,
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Oh yeah, that's next week, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to be here next Thursday. If you want to be here, turn on your YouTube and just pretend you're watching, because we're not going to be here. But I will say that when I see two people, especially older people, and they're walking and they're holding hands, I always tell them, good job. Okay? They are doing something that you just don't see anymore. Most people nowadays each have a phone in their hand and they're talking to somebody else somewhere else in the world while walking together. So let people know when they're doing a good job. All right, here we go. Let me back that up and we'll say goodbye to these folks. I'm glad you said Thanksgiving because I wasn't
Did you
even
pray?
thinking of that. Yes, I closed this out. Break.